sometimes what feels like chaos is really just kind of that moment right before order begins to take place, right before we move into that strategic plan that's going to take us to the next highest level. But it looks like chaos to us sometimes in our own lives, doesn't it? I want you to think back to Greek mythology. I'm gonna challenge your middle school again today. All right, think back to Greek mythology. Remember that the term chaos, or chaos in and of itself, was actually described as the original dark void. Do you remember that? Thinking way back? The original dark void. And it was that divine connection from which everything emerged. Now, it doesn't say from which adversity emerged. It said from which everything was created. Everything. So if you think about the first two things to ever come out of chaos in mythology, the first one was Gaia, and the second one was Eros. Now, Gaia was the deity probably most commonly known as Mother Nature or Mother Earth. Remember Gaia? And the second one was Eros. Anybody remember what Eros was known for? Yes, he was the god of erotic love. What's not to like about that? Also known as the god of human desire. So in reality, the most basic derivatives of chaos are the two things that have the greatest capacity for expansion and growth. Nature, human desire. All right, synchronicity. Let's go there for just a minute. Bliss is not something you achieve, it's something you allow. You can't set a goal of happiness because it's not a task, right? It's like you don't know how to get there, but you know what it is when you see it. It's like, I'll have what they're having, right? That's what happiness is about. So synchronicity can show up in the very smallest of ways. And as we start to pay conscious attention to those things, then they will breed from one another, and it'll happen over and over and over again. I'll tell a really quick story of, this is another story of when I was getting ready to pick up my daughter. I'm seeing a pattern here. When she was much smaller, her father lives way across town from me, like 40 miles away. And so we would have a place that we would meet in the middle. And the place where we meet in the middle is kind of in the middle of nowhere. So it's in fact, the only reason there's an exit there is because it leads to some historical site. I mean, there's nothing there. There's no construction. There's no homes. There's nothing there. There's an overpass. So he pulls under there. I pull under there. We exchange the goods, right? And then we go home. That's what we do. So that's what we did. So we pulled under there. And so, but right before we did, I was once again mowing the grass. Rush, mowing the grass. And I ran over with my mower, one of those little sewage caps. You know what I'm talking about? It's a little round sewage cap. It has like a square top on it. Do you guys have those here? Sheared the top right off of it. I'm like, oh, gee. So I stuck a coffee can on there to keep rodents and stuff out of it. And so got in the car, went to go pick up my daughter. I'm thinking about this stupid sewage cap all the way there. I can't believe I did that, you know, and just kind of running it over through my head. So I pull off of the exit to pick up my daughter, and I can see that they're already parked down in there. So I'm kind of watching that. And as I'm pulling down, I realize there's something in the road, and I have to swerve to get around it. Guess what it was? It was that sewage cap. It still had the Ace Hardware sticker on it. It was exactly the size. Okay, now we're in the middle of freaking nowhere, right? I mean, that's pretty random, you got to admit. Right? So when those things start to happen, that's when you recognize that your thinking is creating some of these things, and you're like, cool. That is so cool. And the more you do it, the more you recognize it. Really important to recognize this is a friendly universe that supports you. But at this point, I remember, I'll never forget this day as long as I live, because Rocco Errico was speaking. Has anybody heard Rocco? If you're not familiar with him, I think he's still around, isn't he? If you're not familiar with him, he's a biblical scholar, and he's also Aramaic. And I remember him telling the story about how the original Bible was written in Aramaic and how that doesn't translate literally into English. And I also remember him talking about how words meant very, very different things 2,000 years ago than they do now, right? I have a 15-year-old. I'm still trying to figure out the language, right? It changes so rapidly, right? But for example, the word sin. The word sin was an archery term, and it meant to miss the mark. To miss the mark. It just meant you missed the mark. You got to try again, right? So it's a very different experience than how we were brought up from the point of sin. And I will tell you, even in my 11-year-old mind, what I felt was an enormous sense of relief. Relief that not just because I was not going to be eternally doomed for my uneducated mistakes, but more importantly, that I had some element of control over the outcome of my life. That was a new piece of message for me.
And it was exciting, and I felt some relief, and I knew that I was home.